Thank you all so much for being here tonight. In the first session I did 1 month ago, I talked to you about how we let her out in 4 steps. First, we remember her, then we reconnect to her, then we remove the barriers to her, and then finally we let her out. Tonight, we're going to dig into that first step, the remembering her. I'm going to invite you into my story tonight again, both the stories that were written in the Wayback Machine and these diaries, and also the pages I've written more recently for the book, Let Her Out. So tonight will be part book reading, part coaching, part inspiration and motivation. I'm going to give you this remembering through 2 different lenses. First is going to be all about remembering young love. This is the remembering that will touch your heart, that will bring out your emotion, and hopefully allow you to feel like it felt when you were young and in love. And second is remembering through action and activity. And through that lens, I'm going to talk to you about the role that music played in my life growing up. That might be a little easier for some of you to connect to because it will reconnect you to an action or an activity that you loved and that brought passion to your life. So without further ado, let's dig in and hear some of this content. Remembering young love. Why did I start that diary in 1988? Because I liked a boy. Why did I keep writing all of those years? Usually because I liked a boy. I thanked one boy in my journal for being in my life simply so I'd pick up the pen and have these stories to write. There is one love that was hard to remember, but it's also an important lesson as we try to remember how we continue to love and fear love and step toward love throughout our life. December 27th, 1988, age 8, my first diary entry ever. I want to go back to school for 2 reasons. 1, I want to see my best friend. 2, I want to go back because I have a crush on a boy. In all caps, I am not going to tell who he is. June 7th, 1989. My best friend gave him a letter. It asked if he still liked me. His answer was yes. So he wrote me and said he might write to me over the summer and I might call him up. We fast forward almost 2.5 years to December 17th, 1991. I'm 11 years old and in the 6th grade. So much has happened in the past month. This day, a month ago, Andy, the one I told you about, died. He was the boy I have always liked best. He had a heart attack and had to be life flighted to Columbus. It came as a shock to everybody. Since that day, all the 6th graders have had the roughest time ever. I am so question mark, question mark, question mark. I don't even know what I feel like. For one thing, I didn't go to his funeral. I got sick, and I didn't go to his viewing either. No one understands just how we feel. Fast forward 4 years to July 16th, 1995. I'm about to enter my sophomore year in high school. I'm crying right now. I just read my diary from 3rd to 8th grade. I can't believe things that happened then. A lot of the diary was about Andy. I never appreciated how much I cared for him. The hardest part to take was when I read December 17th, 1991. I told about Andy's death. I was so confused then. I still am. I don't know if I still should be grieving. I guess I really never got to grieve. I think I've learned a lot about love. I know that love at first sight doesn't work, and I know that long distance love doesn't work. I do know that love can look you straight in the face and you can touch it, but aren't quite sure why it's there. I also know that love, supporting your best friend through the biggest transition in her life and your own life. Sometimes I wonder what the next 15 years of my life are going to be like. I know that I'll look back at this someday and laugh, but for now, this is the only life I know and the only life I've got to live. So I'm treating it like a serious matter. May 25th, 1997. Tomorrow is Memorial Day. It's a time for me to remember people like Andy. He's a veteran to me, a veteran to my world. I wonder often what Andy would be like today. His little brother will enter high school next year. Andy never made it that far. Some survive, some don't. All are remembered. This love, this boy, is one of the reasons I picked up a pen at the tender age of 8. Even at that young age, I knew that there was power in love and power in human connection. Back then, I called it a crush or a fling or someone to go with. Now I know that as love. Whether you remember young love, old love, or rekindled love, it's a part of your story. Love continued to be a part of my stories throughout my diaries. In junior high alone, I claimed to be in love 4 times. In high school, I had long-term love and long-distance romance. Love came hard and fast and ended slow and painful for most of my young life. Many of the people I claimed to love never knew I loved them because I never told them. I told my diary and I told my best friend, but I never told them. Reading about crushes and young love made me cringe. It also made me feel like I haven't felt in a long time. The toughest part of remembering has been remembering the her that fell in love, loved hard, and got hurt harder. It was also the most enlightening part because it reminded me what it was like to feel with my whole body and soul. When you love someone at the age of 15, the sun, moon, and stars orbit around that person. When they kiss you in the moonlight, you remember it for the rest of your life. When they break up with you over email, you feel pain like you've never felt before. Remembering her is as much about the love as it is the pain. How do you remember young love? Who stole your heart only to take it back? Who still holds a piece of your heart in theirs? These may be the memories that are kept between you, your diary, and God, or they may be the stuff of memoirs and romance novels. How does thinking about young love make you feel? Are you cringing right now thinking about your first love? Is your breath a little shallower thinking about long lost love? Whether you've been married 50 years, or you're a newlywed, or you're still with your first love, or you're still searching for the love of your life, how can remembering love, young love, help you let her out? I'm going to pause here for just 30 seconds. I'm going to give you a chance to sit in this for a second. If you feel compelled to write something down or take notes in a digital device, go for it. But right now, with me having spilled my guts of what remembering young love feels like, what does that feel like to you? How does that help you remember her, remember him, so you can ultimately let her out? I'm going to pause and give you a second to think on this one. Now for something a little lighter. We're going to keep going and go to remembering the song in her heart. The love is important, the song is just as important. So here goes this part. For as long as I can remember, music has been part of my life. Remembering her would not be complete without the memories of piano lessons, trombone practice, or choir rehearsal. I started playing piano in 1st grade, trombone in 5th, and have been singing as long as I have had vocal cords. I am not a natural born musician, but I love to watch and listen to those born with this gift. Music in my life was practiced and rehearsed and is the basis for the strong discipline I developed as a child. Music was there to comfort me on a hard day or to be played joyfully on happy occasions. Music is also where I started my career as a teacher and leader. It's where I learned important lessons about recognizing my limitations and embracing my gifts. My sophomore year in high school, I was hired as the choir director and accompanist at the Bloomville United Methodist Church. It was a struggle. I wasn't comfortable going with the flow of the music while simultaneously directing a group of very amateur singers. It was also a lot to handle on top of school, extracurriculars, taking my own piano lessons, and of course, having a boyfriend. I'm not one to quit, so I stuck with it until the day I was fired. I like to think that the main reason for the firing was that the minister's daughter moved back to town and was called in to take over. But part of me also believes it was because I wasn't that good at the job. Whatever the reasons, I was fired for the first time when I was 15 years old. I learned as much from that experience as possible. Soon after getting fired, I quit taking piano lessons, realizing I reached the level I wanted to reach. Instead, I focused on learning how to accompany singers. I learned how to improvise. Instead of practicing classical solo music, I began to play choral and pop music and sang along. In the brief moments of time I had at home alone by myself, I was usually giving a concert to our 2 family dogs. By my senior year in high school, I rotated between singing in and accompanying the school choir. At the same time, the minister called me to ask if I wanted to come back and lead the choir. I said yes without hesitation. I was confident. I knew I could figure out whatever music we picked. I was a strong leader, and I'd taken the previous 2 years to sharpen my accompanying skills. I'd like to think that I was the best 18-year-old church choir director they had ever had. Around the same time I started directing and accompanying the choir, I started teaching piano lessons. There was a lady from church who decided that learning to play piano was on her bucket list, and I sat with her once a week for about 2 years. My favorite student was Tracy. She was learning the piano well enough, but what I discovered was that she had a beautiful voice. We worked in secret for 2 months so she could surprise her mom with a solo of Wind Beneath My Wings at church. Her mom thought she was going to play a song for the congregation, but instead ended up singing to her mom. It remains one of my proudest managerial moments. Throughout elementary, middle, and high school, I played the trombone. The main goal I had was one day to be in the best damn band in the land at The Ohio State University. It's the main reason I selected the trombone in 5th grade and what had me diligently learn the instrument. My trombone playing experience was one where the journey ended up being more important than the destination, as the end of the story is that I didn't make the band at Ohio State, although I did try out. Playing the trombone took me to band competitions, youth band experiences, the Liberty Bowl, and my favorite part of the remembering, the All-Ohio State Fair Band. It was another one of those goals I set as a child after seeing the band play on one of my many trips to the state fair for 4-H. I said, I'm going to be in that band someday. Sophomore year, I sent for the application and was accepted, which meant I spent 1 month of my summer practicing and playing across the Ohio State Fairgrounds. The music was memorable, but the friends were even more memorable. The crowning jewel of my musical career happened as I closed out my high school career. After being in Oklahoma my freshman year, I was in the chorus, The Sound of Music my sophomore year. I was Sister Sophia, one of the 4 singing nuns. Grease my junior year, I played Jan. I was chosen to play Hoddle in Fiddler on the Roof during my senior year. She is the middle daughter who falls in love with a rebel and moves to Siberia after he was arrested. This was the first time I had a solo, a song called Far from the Home I Love. I sang the solo during a scene between Hoddle, her love interest Perchik, and her father Tevye. Our early rehearsals were spent blocking scenes. For those non-theater people, that means you figure out where you're going to move on stage throughout the scene. I was very excited to block the scene that included my solo. With my sister at college and both my parents working, I was at home by myself both before and after school. During that time, I would play myself the starting note on the piano, and I would stand in the middle of the living room and pretend I was on the stage performing. On the night we blocked the scene, we got to the portion where the song was, and the musical director said, "We can skip the song." My reply was, "Well, actually, I've been practicing the song. I can sing it a cappella. Is that all right?" He said, "Sure." I proceeded to sing the solo for the first time in that empty auditorium. I sang with every ounce of emotion and passion I had. At the end of the song, my two fellow cast members and the musical director stood in silence, and we all stared at each other. It was then that my musical director, Ron, told me one of the most important things I learned in theater, and perhaps life. He said, "Natalie, I know you're used to applause, but no one's going to clap at the end of the scene. And if you perform it right, there will probably be silence." In that moment, it didn't make any sense. After all, this was my senior year, my swan song, my time for a round of applause. Dress rehearsals came to a close and we prepared for opening night. When my scene came, once again, I sang my heart out, and there was silence. Not even my parents clapped. The same situation played out for the remainder of our performances. I'm grateful Ron gave me the advice he did, because I knew to anticipate the silence. What didn't make sense my senior year of high school about this silence now makes perfect sense as a 40-year-old woman. There are days when we give it our best. We cook the finest dinner, we wrap the hardest project at work, we close the biggest sale of our career, and we want a standing ovation. We want acknowledgement for our hard work. We want a pat on the back. Often, however, we are met with silence. We have to remind ourselves that the only applause we need in our lives comes from within. The rest is the icing on the cake that we baked for ourselves. The song in my heart is greater than any musical performance or standing ovation. That's how I like to remember her. I remember the girl who in the summer of her 16th year said, "I found the song in my heart." That's what remembering her is all about. It's about remembering that song in her heart, that skip in her step, that glint in her eye, that humor in her voice. When we remember her that way, we have a better chance of letting her out. So I ask you tonight, what's the equivalent to the song in your heart? What brought you joy as a child, a teenager, as a young adult? What activity, relationship, or cause made you light up a room? Once again, I'm going to give you a little bit of time here, and I want you to write down what comes to mind in as much detail as possible. Who were you with? What was the scene? What were you doing? What's the equivalent to your song in your heart? I'll pause for just a second and give you a moment to reflect. When I send out the email with the recording, I'm going to put an even longer list of questions that you can use to help you remember her. Because between now and the next time we meet, whether you participate again next month or we talk next week, I want you to actively start remembering her. What emotions did she feel? What was that young love like in her life? What was the song in her heart? How can you bring that out every single day to get even closer to letting her play full out? I want to live in a world where she's out, and I know you have it in you to get her there. I'm going to repeat one of the paragraphs I said to close out tonight because I think it's the crux of how we think about the remembering. That's what remembering her is all about. It's about remembering that song in her heart, that skip in her step, that glint in her eye, that humor in her voice. When we remember her that way, we have a better chance of letting her out. Thank you so much.